So before Casino Royale was ever even in production, they had already started writing this story because they already knew that Casino Royale was going to lead into whatever this movie was going to be. They didn't have a title for it yet. So Eon goes to writing team Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. Again, we talked about forever ago. They started, I believe, with World Is Not Enough as being like their main go-to writers, and they still are their main go-to writers. And they had already cracked a story for the Fallout film. This was so they could tell Bond's emotional story after the death of Vesper, much like Chuck just laid out for us in this opening. In this version, the version that they had originally written, Bond was to let Mr. White go in Sienna, and he would follow him to find his organization, whatever that organization may have been. And Paul Haggis, who did the rewrites on Casino, finished his rewrites only 2 hours before the 2007-2008 writer's strike. Now, why is this such a big deal? Because this writer's strike, which is weird because we're talking about this now, this is like right when we were seniors in high school, but this kind of had changed a lot of movies coming out of that writer's strike, because when you don't have writers to back your films up, or even when you're in the process of making the movie, you can't make changes on the fly as easily.
It ruined a lot of good stuff. It wreaked havoc with everything. Like anything that you liked at the time, there's still this scar there. Like, oh, you like that show Lost?
Yeah. There's season 4, there's not as many episodes.
Writer strike comes along and it leaves this rift, and it's tragic, especially right after Casino, to kneecap this movie right away.
Which sucks because you're trying to start basically they're rebooting this franchise. So they kind of have to start from scratch a little bit. And it's unfortunate this happened right when they're making their next movie, which is really like, I think, what was it? Steve Jobs said something like, it's not the first product that's the hit, it's the second one that's really going to say if the product or whatever you're putting out there is going to be a success, because that's really going to be the focal point of like, oh yeah, they can keep hitting home runs.
You're not a one-hit wonder.
Yeah. Neil and Robert Wade, they'll write the script as a team. They write the script, and then someone, either the director of that movie or another writer, in this case it was Paul Haggis, would write like another draft of that script that they'd written. So he's like the third person. And that original script was going to be I think it was called Sleep for the Dead.
Do you think they'll be able to sleep now?
I don't think the dead care about vengeance.
Was the original title for that script. And that script,
was it Another Way to Die?
Another Way to Die.
Unfortunately, it wasn't. No. So he wrote that script, and just let me lay out the writer's strike, what it was about. So basically at that point, now we're living in this time where like new media is what's called new media, or streaming is very prevalent. We have streaming Netflix, HBO Max, whatever it might be. Heck, I mean, I watched Quantum today on HBO Max, so I'm watching it via streaming. But at the time, there wasn't any new rules for residuals for writers for anything that was streamed, especially if it was written specifically for online. So they were wanting that, as well as a better deal on DVD residuals. So that was all going on right before this. And so then they had to go on all of the WGA, all of the Writers Guild of America went on strike. And the script that they had for the sequel to Casino, they had finished it like literally 2 hours before. They were like, yep, we're striking. Like, you got to stop working. You can't touch anything. So that was what they had to go off of doing this film. Originally, director Roger Mitchell was announced to direct the sequel. Mitchell is probably best known for the films such as Notting Hill and Enduring Love, but later he had directed Kragan. Mitchell left the project, whatever the sequel is going to be, because they didn't call it Quantum just yet, because the script was taking too long. It was waiting. They should have had this probably done or ready to go by 2006, because they had the idea of what the script was going to be before they even started making Casino.
You have to wonder when the title did ultimately change, because Quantum of Solace is technically a Bond title from the books. It was a short story. So in what order did it change? The organization is Spectre, but they can't say Spectre, so they say Quantum, but did they only do that after they decided on Quantum of Solace? And then it was like, how about the name of the organization is Quantum, which comes from it's kind of like a confused thing. In the end, I think it works, but you have to wonder the order of events. What did they call it before they called it Quantum would be my question.
Why can't they say Spectre?
It wasn't until after they did Casino that I think McClory may have passed away like right when that movie came out or right after or whenever, but it wasn't till then. And then there was some legality of who owned the rights to Thunderball, which led into who owned the rights to who could say Spectre, who couldn't say Spectre, because Spectre was a product out of Thunderball. So they couldn't say that. Going back to the books, Casino Royale ends with him learning about Schmersh, not about Spectre. Spectre didn't come into play till Thunderball. So if you're like, okay, well, we're going to still adapt Casino, there's some organization that leaves you with an open-ended thing like, we can't say Spectre at this moment. Well, we'll put a filler in there. And then they're like, well, call it Quantum. So anyway, Mikey G. Wiz and Barbara Broccoli decide on Mark Forrester to direct. Up until this time, Forrester had directed films such as Monster Ball with Charlie's favorite actress, Halle Berry, Finding Neverland, and Stranger Than Fiction. So not really any action films. However, Forrester thought Casino was way too long, and it was he who wanted this film to be tighter than Chucky Rant's butthole when a Baskin-Robbins joke is being shoved in.
Dude, I can't put in Ant-Man jokes into this episode because nobody's going to know what the f- you're talking about.
Anyway, that all being said, yeah, this movie, if most people don't know, I believe is the shortest Bond movie. It's an hour and 46 minutes. Huh. Most Bond films are like 2 hours plus. This one is
like 210, 215.
Yeah, this one's short. I mean, most of the movies that you see in theaters generally will go 90 minutes, 100 minutes. It's a really easy, breezy time. It's not too long. It's not too short. But this movie runs in that gambit of 146, which is weird. I look
forward to hearing your thoughts on it because last episode you kept complaining that Casino's too long. So I don't want to be hearing this is too short. You know what I mean?
All right. This movie's too short. I honestly, I don't really have opinion either way about the length of the film.
Like somebody should make a
context,
fan edit where you combine both of them.
I wonder if there's like a channel for that. Forrest wanted all the action sequences to revolve around the 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire, heart, go planet. The title comes from the short story in Fleming's For Your Eyes Only. I'll let Charlie elaborate.
I always urge everybody to read all of these books. If you like these movies, you should read all the books.
Check them out in the description below.
Yeah, use our affiliate links. I almost don't even want to spoil what it is because it's so odd. It is just not a Bond story. It has nothing to do with this. It is completely different from anything Fleming ever wrote, but he's just telling a story about a really bad marriage. That's it. It's just kind of weird. So the title, I think, is fantastic. You need to break out a dictionary when you're, when you're a kid and this movie comes out, you're like, what's a quantum and what's a solace?
But
once you put together what it is, it's a small, like I said in the opener, it's a small amount of consolation basically, which is perfect following Casino Royale. And so Mark Forrester is obviously an intelligent dude. I never put together what you just said, but I think that's brilliant. Action sequences following the 4 elements. It's great.
Dominic Green, CEO of Green Planet. It's a utility company, but Green's been doing a lot of philanthropic work, buying up large tracts of land for ecological preserves.
Specifically because it's a story about natural resources.
You don't need another Marxist giving national resources to the people, do you?
Yeah. And as the more I read about this movie, the more I found that Mark Forrester, as much as this movie gets shit on, and I think it kind of does, but you do realize that he was trying really hard to make this movie as best as you can. Like, nobody goes out of their way to make a bad movie. This movie sounds like he really had a take and something he wanted to make out of this film. Unfortunately, it didn't sway for him. I believe the common complaint this film gets is its editing. From the action scenes to even common dialogue scenes are intercut with shots that may last only a few seconds. This can be very jarring. In the past, we did talk about how
a few frames.
What did I say? 2 shots, 2 frames. Okay, let me say what I said. Okay, so from the action scenes to even common dialogue scenes are intercut with frames that may last only a few seconds. This can be very jarring.
No. With shots that may only last a few frames. But just go ahead. Just keep reading.
Just keep reading. I hate you.
Just keep reading.
But I said a few seconds, whatever.
A
This
few
can be jarring
seconds
in the
is a
past.
long time. In an action scene, that's a long time. A few frames is more accurate because it's like, shoom, 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 shoom.
Yeah, but I mean, if you don't know the lingo and you're saying like, oh, it's like literally a second or whatever, then that's it's fairly short. You know what I mean?
Just keep going.
Okay, so this can be very jarring. In the past, we did talk about how the Bourne franchise had indirectly changed the outlook of the franchise. The Bourne franchise, starting with Bourne Identity, came out in 2002, the same year as Die Another Day. That film is very straightforward in its edits, nothing too crazy. The second film, directed by Paul Greengrass, Bourne Supremacy, came out in 2004, 2 years before Casino, has a lot of jarring edits and lots of shaky handheld camera that had become almost commonplace in the mid to early 2000s when we watched a lot of these types of action films. We've said this before, but every Bond film tends to lean into the current trends. But if you want your movie to do it right, might as well hire the people who started the trend in the first place. The editor on Quantum is in fact the same editor on Bourne Supremacy, Richard Pearson, who has also been credited for other films such as Iron Man 2, Kong Skull Island, Justice League, The Whedon Cut. Do you see a pattern here emerging with your editor and those movies?
Yeah.
It makes you think, it makes you wonder. Let's talk about some familiar faces real quick. So of course, we talk Craig returns, Jeffrey Wright returns as Felix Leiter. Our main Bond girl is Olga Kurylenko, plays Camille Montez. Yeah, is that right? Camille Montez? Camille? She is actually from Ukraine and had to get a DVD box set to watch the rest of the films because I guess in Ukraine they didn't have them readily available.
Because the movies glorify the West.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're hard to get a hold of.
They were. I mean, like she had to get a DVD box set to actually watch all the other films. So she was probably a little more cognizant of what everything, all the Bond tropes and all that stuff, right? She was picked out of 400 other women, mainly due to not being nervous in the audition.
It's all about confidence.
She also had to get an accent coach to do the Latin American accent.
Mucho gusto.
Because she is from the Ukraine, so she'd have a different accent. I never knew that going into this movie. I thought she was from Latin America. She is not.
They do make a point of saying she's half Russian.
Did you know Ernesto Montes?
You have a beautiful Russian wife.
Well, his daughter works for me. Or did.
She's lovely.
Dude, shout out
I
to
just find that's
Ukraine.
cool.
If anybody who watches this is from Ukraine, can you invite me over? All y'all got some good-looking females in the Ukraine. You got a war going on right now. Send them my way.
So anyway, Matthew Almeric. Is that how you say his name? Matthew?
Is that the guy who
Matthew?
plays?
It looks like a weird
Green?
spelling of Matthew.
Matthew Almeric plays Dominic Green. He's French, by the way. Forster chose Almeric for his pitiful quality. He just kind of has a look that he could be kind of pitiful. Almeric wanted to wear makeup like every Bond villain before him to look grotesque, but Forster went all Chucky Rants and wasn't having any of that shit. He's like, no, we're not doing that.
Are his teeth being yellow natural?
I think I think that Forster was like, I don't want it to be the same as every other Bond villain. You know, I don't want him to have the scar like in Casino. I want
he
this guy
definitely comes across as really sleazy. He does
the
a great
yellow
job
teeth, I think, is a fantastic call because the guy's whole thing is, like you said, he comes across as meek and like his whole thing is I care so much about the planet until he smiles, and then there's just something off about him. These days, everybody wants to complain like it's ableist or whatever, but this is a visual medium. And it being a visual medium, that's why sometimes bad guys have certain visual qualities that indicate bad guy. I understand people wanting to get rid of them or a specific director being like, no, I don't want to do that this time because that's a choice. But this choice of the yellow teeth and those black devilish eyes, perfect. Green is a classic satanic figure, someone who gives off the appearance of meekness and even benevolence, but this is a deception. Just like his organization, Green Planet, it gives off the bright and shiny hope of a better tomorrow, but really it exists only to benefit itself.
I give you Icarus!
Green pulls this trick just like the devil himself would, by appealing to the ego and vanity of all the beautiful people at his party.
The Terra Project is just one small part of a global network of eco-parks that Green Planet has created to rejuvenate a world on the verge of collapse. I hope that tonight you make the decision to be part of that.
Ever been to Pleasure Island? Me neither. But they say it's a swell joint. No school, no cops. You can tear the joint apart. And nobody says a word. Plenty to eat, plenty to drink, and it's all free.
Right here, boys, right here. Get your cake, pie, dill pickles, and ice cream. Eat all you can. Be a glutton. Stuff yourselves. It's all free, boys. It's all free.
You'd think something was gonna happen to us.
I couldn't agree more. I hope this figure is to your liking.
They give him their money, and in return, he gives them a feeling of self-satisfaction that isn't real at all.
What's he think I look like? A jackass?
You sure do.
You boys have had your fun. Now pay for it.
And then meanwhile, he does the same thing with Medrano. He gives with one hand and takes with the other.
We've already begun destabilizing the government. We'll supply the private security. We'll pay off the right officials. And we have 26 countries ready to officially recognize your new Bolivian government. You want your country back. My organization can give it to you within the week.
And in return, you want what?
A desert, this part.
This land is worthless.
So you're getting a great deal.
You won't find oil there. Everyone has tried.
Maybe, maybe not. But we own whatever we find.
As we said, he technically does have a weird physical deformity just like other Bond baddies, but by virtue of being easily hidden, he is that devil in plain sight, like hiding his horns under a hat, all the way up until he faces Bond physically and that act of meekness goes away and he reveals just how maniacal he really is.
Forster wanted him to just have a plain look to him. He didn't want him to look like a villain because basically the same reasons as you're saying. I didn't read anything about the yellow teeth, but it was mainly just because I want somebody who can basically, you see him out in public, there's nothing bad going on over here, like everything's all good. But obviously we know
we're saving the
that's not
planet.
the
And then everybody cheers and he smiles, and you're like, whoa.
Wait a minute, huh?
Wait a second. This guy wants to save the world, but he can't even look after his own teeth?
It's the eco-friendly toothpaste. That's what it is. Next up, we got Gemma Arterton. I think I said that right. Arterton plays Chucky Rant's fever dream, Strawberry Fields, which is weird tie-in to not only the Beatles, but how every Bond girl is a sexual innuendo.
Oh, providing the collars and cuffs match.
Yeah, sorry, Chucky. She isn't a natural redhead.
I tend to notice little things like that.
But she is
I don't
she is
care.
gorgeous.
I don't
she
mind.
is gorgeous.
I take them as they come.
Why don't you just dye the parts that show?
I do think this is weird, right? Like, think about it this way. When we talked about Goldfinger, in that movie, they make a reference to the Beatles, and Connery says something about like listening to being without earmuffs.
That's as bad as listening to the Beatles without earmuffs.
And now we're full circle. We come to this scene where she's playing a character that's sort of named after a Beatles song.
Mr. Bond, my name is Fields.
She's not sort of named after a Beatles song. That is
Straight
a
up named after.
Beatles song.
And she gets covered in oil, not gold, like in Goldfinger. Yeah. Going off again, what Chuck was saying earlier was this is basically, again, Forster making a choice and saying this is showing how the current expensive currency today is not gold, but it is oil. And that's why she is covered in oil.
Black gold. But they never say strawberry in this movie.
It might be useful to know your real name.
Fields. Just Fields.
So,
No.
Did they
Miss
just
Fields.
cut that out?
I don't know.
Obviously,
but
the joke is that she's embarrassed to say her name is Strawberry. But is that in the credits? Where is it that suddenly she's Strawberry Fields?
I don't think it ever comes up. It's on the IMDb, but they only ever call her Miss Fields, and then she's got reddish hair.
If it's in the credits, I'm like, okay, but she, that's the joke. Just Fields.
It's in the credits, Strawberry Fields.
And I get why they would cut that, but what is the moment where it's revealed where she, what would that have been without it causing a laugh? Can you imagine if M would have been like, why her, Bond?
Why her, Bond?
Her name was Strawberry. Just poor Strawberry, and Bond's sitting there and he's like, it would cause an inappropriate laugh no matter where it was unveiled. Yeah. So I get why they cut it, but it's weird. It's like a unfired Chekhov's gun. situation.
Fields it is.
The movie has several of these little moments where you think, why didn't they just cut that out? Why didn't they just delete Strawberry from the credits? And then the obvious interpretation would be that she's trying to keep things professional by not giving Bond her first name. It's pretty clear that Mark Forster didn't think that a ginger pubic hair joke would be appropriate for his art film, but then why leave it in the credits?
Doesn't he say something like strawberries? He says something like...
Lovely girl. Tastes like strawberries.
He doesn't say anything like
I
strawberries.
never say
Why
the word
am I thinking
strawberry.
he says that?
Like strawberries.
No, it never comes up. Okay.
Yeah.
Never comes up.
You know, as far as Bond references go, I wasn't really keeping my ear to the ground looking for him, but there is one that definitely sticks out to me, and that is the moment where he's got that bodyguard on the edge of the building. You know, he's questioning him. The guy grabs him. That's straight out of The Spy Who Loved Me, where he...
Where's Peckish? Pyramids!
Pyramids! And then he knocks him off. You know, he literally slaps him. He slaps his hand, and he falls off the building.
Yeah.
And then a few minutes later, he says he's going to Cairo.
You're gonna get a phone call in a minute. Would you mind telling them I'm headed for Cairo?
Like, that's definitely a reference. Like,
Yeah.
it'd be one thing just knocking the guy off the building, but also referencing Cairo, because that's where that action took place in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Egyptian builders.
And then something a little more vague is the climactic battle with a fire axe from A View to a Kill. But otherwise, there's nothing as blatant as the oil girl, right?
No. David Harbour plays Greg Beam. It's just cool to see him in a role pre-Stranger Things where nobody really knows who he is at the time.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about it. It's just like, yeah, there's David Harbour. Kind of like when we saw Gerard Butler in Tomorrow Never Dies.
There's one other just like that. You're always pointing out Game of Thrones. You can't help
Oh,
yourself.
God.
Even though Game of Thrones sucks,
Okay.
you
Chucky.
always point them out, so we might as well do it.
All right, hold on.
Do
I
it.
didn't get her name.
Famously, she's Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter.
Ona Chaplin
She actually is the name.
gets a beer. She gets a beer
And
for
then
the
gets
general.
R-A-P-E-D.
She gets more than a beer.
Bad stuff happens to her, and then I swear you see a crotch shot of her.
They give her an upskirt to put on the snooty hat. And Mark Forster, he definitely has a snooty hat, but he deserves a snooty hat. It's like, suddenly we're the voyeur, we're violating her with our vision after the general violated her with his, you know what.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like, it seems unnecessary in that moment. It's like, whoa, hey,
Yeah.
cut away. Hey, editor.
You're like, whoa,
I thought
hey.
you cut every shot down to a few frames, but you can't trim that one? Come on.
Yeah. Cameos, real quick. Alfonso Cuarón. He's best known for Children of Men and Gravity. He has a small cameo in this film because he's friends with Forster, and he is a Bolivian helicopter pilot. Also, Del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, he has some voices in the movie. That was, I don't know what voices he has, but sometimes in the backdrop you hear character voices, and apparently he's in the movie. And of course, we cannot forget our good friend of the channel. He's not a friend of the channel. Mikey G. Wiz. Mikey G. Wiz.
Where's he at?
He's in the movie. He's reading a newspaper. I don't know where it was at.
It's after the fight scene. Bond comes down and he's like, hey, and he messages, and she gives him the briefcase. Mikey G. Wiz is just chilling there
He's just
reading the
sitting there.
newspaper. You'd think he would have grown that Montego back out again.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, where are we going? Haiti? I got to get my Latino look going.
Fun
Like
stuff.
the last few movies he'd have speaking roles, and in this one he's like,
He's
gonna
gonna
sit here and
read a
catch up
newspaper.
on this paper, yeah.
This one's more personal for me, but I think it's kind of cool. Neil Jackson plays Edmund Slate, who's a minor character. He's just basically like a jumping off point for Bond to kind of lead into his investigation.
It's a solid fight scene, though.
It's a solid fight scene. Oh, you know what? That is a reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Very similar to a fight scene that was in On Her Majesty's
Like the
Secret Service in the
hotel
hotel.
room
Yeah.
fight? Yeah,
It's very
that makes
similar.
sense.